Hey, so a lot has happened since Apple released the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max with ProRes Log video recording. I released a bunch of LUTs for it. They've been very popular. Since then, I've done a bunch of shooting with the phone and a bunch of color work. I've got another batch of LUTs for you, but first I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience shooting the phone. Almost immediately after the phone came out, I took a really cool trip to Peru, and while I was there, I did shoot a little bit of video. And then I kind of ran out of shots because the truth is I still found myself feeling really weird pulling out the phone and shooting with it. I kept feeling obligated to bring out my giant Sony mirrorless camera and shoot, like proper photography. And so I shot a lot less video than now I wish I had. Now in shooting all this footage, editing it, coloring it, I've learned a lot more about the Apple Log format. And I've got a new batch of LUTs for you. So let's take a look. First up, we're going to look at 3 different LUTs for converting from Apple Log to Rec. 709 video, each with a slightly different look, but these aren't really looks. You color correct underneath them. I've got 2 technical variations on those just for exposure. Then there are 4 more technical LUTs for bridging your Apple Log into an ACES workflow. And then I've got 2 super cool LUTs that will make sure you never miss exposure when shooting Apple Log. This may be the coolest part of the video, so stick around. So these LUTs work just about anywhere, but we're going to look at Magic Bullet Colorista. This is my log original footage here, and I've got a couple other clips in here that I've been using for testing. First thing is to set Colorista to log mode because the footage is log, and then we're going to choose a LUT. And just kind of as our baseline for calibrating our eyeballs and expectations, we're going to look at Apple's own LUT. So this is Apple's LUT, and as you can see, it's as punchy and saturated as you would expect from the iPhone shooting in its normal video modes. Skin tone is really saturated. As you can see kind of the crazy disparity between me and Bruce here. There's a lot of kind of pink in me and yellow in him, and what that means is that the differences in skin tones are going to be pulled apart and highlighted. Karen looks great. Maybe this shot's a little overexposed. In fact, the background is actually blown out in the original, and so how those kinds of things are treated are really important in a LUT. But mainly here, what you'll notice, the big characteristic of this is the punchy contrast and these bright saturated colors. So let's name this clip Apple. We'll duplicate it, and let's take a look at the new ProRes LUTs. I love the way Colorista shows you a nice thumbnail preview of all of the LUTs in your library here. I've divided the new ones up into categories to make them a little easier to find, and I've given them memorable names to make them easier to choose because their long file names are kind of annoying. So the first one we'll look at is the new kind of best practices LUT. This is called PL Hero. Check it out. You can see that it looks a lot like the Apple one, but just with less contrast. So there's Apple, there's PL Hero. So what this does to me is it gives me a lot of room to add or subtract as much contrast as I want. I'd rather add contrast in the grade than remove it, so I'd rather start with a LUT that's just kind of a gentler approximation of a film-like S-curve. And you'll especially see this in terms of like how it treats skin tones, right? So here's the Apple one, very punchy, and here's mine. And then again, in terms of like how blown out highlights are treated, you can see Apple is trying so hard to kind of hold on to the slightly overexposed skin tones in the shot that it's actually bringing out this weird detail in the brick. And you can see the much more sort of natural way that the highlights are rolling off into overexposure using my LUT. Now, this is a slightly different, here, let's name this Hero. And this is a slightly different look than the previous version of the ProRes kind of best practices LUT. The one that everyone kind of fell in love with, I think. It had a slightly more contrast, a little bit more like the Apple LUT. So what I've got here is a LUT called PLOG, and this is just a closer match to that original best practices LUT. And you'll see it's just got a little more contrast. Very similar to Hero, but just with more punch. If you like this one better, I absolutely endorse it. It's a really nice look. I just kind of wanted to correct what was really basically a technical mistake in creating this one. So the Hero one is basically a pretty dispassionate kind of treatment of converting the Apple Log color space to Rec. 709 with a very simple highlight roll-off curve courtesy of DaVinci Resolve tone mapping, which is a kind of no-frills tone mapping. The OG, you can see there's just a little more of a push out here, which means that like the highlights are gonna just be a little sharper and the shadows are gonna be a little more crushed. So that's OG. If you like the previous generation of LUTs, this is the one that you're gonna love. The other thing I'd done with the previous generation of LUTs is I included an ACES version. OG and Hero are using Resolve tone mapping. The ACES version is using ACES tone mapping, which means that I'm actually taking the Apple Log space, converting it into ACES land, and then using the ACES ODT, the standard ACES way of taking any ACES format and preparing it for Rec. 709 output. Some people love the way that looks, some people don't, but it's available to you as a choice. So that's PL ACES. We'll apply that, and it's just sort of a different look. Let's go through them again. So here's the original Apple, here's Hero, and then let's just compare directly to ACES. So you can just see the contrast is a little different. You know, the shadow areas are a little more softly defined, I think. It's really nice. I really like this, actually. It's good. Good job, Academy. One thing all these versions have in common is that they all have a +1 EV. They're all overexposed slightly, which you'll notice matches pretty well Apple's LUT. Apple, I think, with that LUT and with the way they're automatically exposing the log footage, is encouraging you to underexpose and preserve highlights. I think this is a good idea. Funny thing happened in my previous video. I mentioned that you shouldn't expect the Apple Log footage to compete with an Alexa or a Sony Venice. So don't expect the dynamic range of an Arri Alexa or Sony Venice. And then Apple released their video with this quote in it.
You can treat it like you could an Alexa or a Venice or anything like that.
And since then, the CineD folks have done a great dynamic range test, and they corroborate Apple that the dynamic range of the iPhone, thanks to the amazing noise reduction, is competitive with the Alexa and the Sony Venice. So I was wrong, and Apple was right. So if you don't want that +1 EV, I've got options for you as well. So let's just pop a new layer on here and let's look at the tech options. So the ones with tech in the name are like technically correct. So if you look at AC Tech, this is ACES without the +1 EV. And that might look nicer on this shot of Karen. Actually, it does. It looks lovely. But you can also just do that kind of exposure adjustment in the grade under any one of these LUTs. It's not going to matter. So there's also oh, there it is, PL Tech, okay. And so this is basically Hero, but without the +1 EV. And on these shots, it looks a little underexposed, and on this shot, it looks, again, just lovely. All right, what else do we got? Well, we got something really cool. So in addition to the technical LUTs, which I'll show you real quick, so we just have a series of ACES technical LUTs here, Apple Log to ACES CC, Apple Log to ACES CCT, with and without that +1 EV. So those are for converting Apple Log into an ACES workflow. Now check this out. These are the Hero FC and ACES FC. And I'm going to show them to you here in post, but these are designed for shooting. And what you're going to see is a false color. You know what false color is, right? So false color is that cool switch on the monitor that makes everything look like the predator is trying to eat you. It's a lovely idea, but I find it like baffling to use. I look at it and I'm like, but where did my image go? And you're supposed to kind of have it up alongside your image, but like I'm just a guy with a phone, right? And I have this amazing Blackmagic camera app. I can load any LUT I want, but I kind of want a LUT where I can shoot and see the normal image, but also check my exposure while I'm shooting. And that's why I've got these lovely grayscale ramps here so you can see what's going on. This yellow patch isn't really yellow. It's actually exactly iPhone 18% gray. So what happens when you shoot with this LUT is you get this yellow band that shows you exactly where 18% gray is. You can adjust your camera exposure until 18% gray lands right where you want it and turns yellow. That has been so helpful to me. I can just use this LUT, see a normal looking image, but put 18% gray where I want it. Overexposed areas will turn red. underexposed, like really actually clipping the black levels, will turn blue. All of this live in camera while you're shooting. Can't stress enough how handy this is. So I've got that false color available in both the Hero config with the DaVinci Resolve tone mapping and the Aces config with the Aces tone mapping. So I screwed up in Peru. I didn't shoot enough with my phone, but luckily a month later I had another awesome trip to Taiwan, and this time I did shoot a lot of wonderful stills with my Sony, but I also shot a lot of video with my phone. And I graded it all using Magic Bullet, running in Resolve, and these brand new LUTs. Thanks for keeping up with me on this saga. Download the free LUTs in the link below and watch for more from me in this space, because I got this cool little handle on my phone and I got filters for it, and I'm gonna do more with this. It's exciting. See you next time.